Welcome to More Than Mindset, the only podcast that bridges the gap between spirituality and success. Go beyond the mind with clarity and confidence coach Kim Guillory and learn how to integrate your passion to serve with your skills and experience to create a business you love. Let's get started.
Hey there, and welcome back to the show. Boy, do I have a treat for you. I have been studying human design and gene keys and some astrology and a few other cosmo kind of things for the last few years. And it has made such a huge impact in my understanding of humanity, of our life on Earth, on really getting to some of the conditioning and the roots of suffering that was happening in my life on several areas, especially in understanding myself, the relationships with myself, in my career, with my friendships, as well as my children. And I have to tell you that this study has led me to this, the best way I can say it, and we mentioned this several times in the show, is this radical self-acceptance, this radical understanding and healing myself of the unworthiness and the low self-esteem and kind of a revamping of self-image. So this is the kind of work that I've been doing in Self-Healing Masters and with my clients and integrative coaching. It's all about rewiring the way we perceive things, the way that we understand. And I have worked with quite a few practitioners over the years. I will have a couple of others on. Hopefully, I can get them here. They haven't been up to it yet, but we have had conversations about it. But Danielle and I have been working together. We figured out it's probably about a couple of years. And I absolutely love our work together. And I've asked her to come and teach her. I'm not sure how we're going to sum this up, but it's a combination of astrology, human design, gene keys. She just has this beautiful holistic mix of seeing the bigger picture, and the way she weaves the systems together to paint a picture for us is phenomenal. And I have referred clients to her, and she's helped me, with working through some of the stuff with my clients and helping me to understand what makes us tick, what makes some of the relationships kind of stagnant and stuck. And I've asked her to come onto the show and to introduce herself, or I'll introduce her. And we are going to dive into some of this stuff. It gets kind of deep, so just know that we are creating a program. It's Discover Your Design. It's all about unveiling the blueprint of who you truly are. And this is something that we're doing in Self-Healing Masters, but it's also available. The way that she pieces it together and describes it, you'll be super interested, I think. So I just wanted to come on and give you this little intro, letting you know where we were going with the show. It's still the same concepts here that's in Self-Healing Masters and with my private clients and coaching. None of that has changed. I've actually been using these systems for the last few years, even with my clients. So I've kind of this is my coming out of the closet kind of moment. The liberation that has been created from people truly understanding who they are and how they tick it's just been fabulous. So here we go. There is going to be a point where this show cuts off accidentally. We didn't mean for that to happen. And we will pick up the rest of it on the next episode following. So just give you a little heads up on that. Enjoy. I have a special guest with you here today. Her name is Danielle Rodenroth. And Danielle is one of my new BFFs because she likes to talk all things design. And I mean by soul purpose design, like the inside, I don't know, Danielle, how would we talk about the work that we do? How would we paraphrase that?
Like the codes of life, the codes of existence and reality, and learning how to read them.
The thing inside of the shell. Inside of the beyond the mask kind of thing. So what we're going to discuss today is a program that Danielle and I are doing together. I still haven't figured out what I'm going to call you or how we're going to put this in Self-Healing Masters, but I've been craving a partner in this type of work where we talk about all of the fun stuff of codes and designs and, using birth charts and our actual, the stuff beyond the existence that we use in everyday life. I'd say for the last couple of years, been craving really doing this deeper work with someone who is educated, who's has the language and the understanding. I don't have that. I don't claim to have that. I'm not a chart reader. I know just enough to get by and get me in trouble, and then have to reach out to someone else and say, okay, I'm at this point where this makes sense, but then it's not matching up. Can you? And then they can kind of give me the secrets behind that. And that is what Danielle has been for me for the last couple of years. And then we decided to team up and partner this work together. So I'm going to let her introduce herself to you and all of the fun stuff that she does.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Kim. Hi, everyone. And yeah, I'm just really happy to be here and explain a little bit more about what we're wanting to share with everyone, and really just embracing and just sharing this special knowledge that we have as a humanity. And, in case you don't know, there are different codes and languages and systems out there that we're able to use to understand our lives and our existence in a new way that really brings a lot of meaning and purpose to our life, and really just being more at home with ourselves and empowered in who we really are. So the languages that we use allow us to go on a path of radical self-acceptance and to know ourselves on a really deep level. So that is what Kim and I are really wanting to share with you guys. I've done thousands of readings. I geek out on the different languages. I would consider myself like a syncretist, where I like to bridge several different systems. So I work with the codes of human design, which I know very well. I also have been studying astrology for over 10 years. And I've done a lot of indigenous work with initiation rites and plant medicine and things like that. So yeah, I just like to bridge it all together to provide a different viewpoint of understanding why we exist, and to help each one of us individually find our differentiation in that using these codes. And so it's really fun. So yeah, we're going to be introducing that for you guys.
I was going to say the thing that I got most out of our work together is understanding myself, my relationships, and myself in my business. I knew this and I was doing it naturally. And then there was a way that you explained it that confirmed what I knew, that helped me with clarity and confidence. So when I was recognizing it for myself, I was just basically doing it and things were just happening. And then when I started really looking into human design and trying to figure out more about my design and how to live it, and that's when I contacted you. And then we started with you introduced Gene Keys, and I started, like going a little bit deeper with it. There was something that I think it was the confirmation that I was looking for. Like when you said it, you were like, well, yeah, surely you're supposed to be doing this because, because of this is this. And I was like, no, actually I did it because of this. And you're like, no, that's just your conditioning. Like, that's just what you thought. It's actually because, it came very natural to you. It's just like, it's who you're designed to be. It's, that is your work. And that's when I really started, I would say, like, I feel in the moment when I'm saying this right now, I kind of want to just like sink down into my sit bones. Like, it was just like this, take the load off.
Right.
Like, I truly can trust life. I don't have to figure it out for my head. And you were like, you have no head to figure out. Like, it's not even yours. And I'm like, what? And so now I notice when I'm just, because every client that has come to me for the last few years, even before I knew about human design and gene codes, I was running birth charts on. And it was because I was like, boo, I don't trust you and what you're telling me. Give me your birth time, your birth date, your information, and we're going to see what's really under there. And I don't know that anyone has ever declined giving me that information. And that's how I knew they were my people. Anyone who's willing to go dig up a birth certificate and give you their birth time, something there. So we can talk about that today. I love what you just said, which is radical self-acceptance. That's it right there.
Yeah. And I think that that's actually something that Richard Rudd, when I was reading the Gene Keys, that was one of the things that like stuck out for me. A lot of times when we're, coming into a new path, or we want to fix something in our life, or we want to change, or just make our life better, whatever the motivation is. A lot of times we think, or we're programmed to believe, that the only way to do that is to change a bunch of stuff about ourselves, and then we have all these things we have to do, and that's like the opposite. It's actually about really accepting yourself and allowing yourself. So all the things that you were just saying, Kim, with what you experience with you and I, really is about like having the permission to be ourselves, and it's that permission that we have, because a lot of the things we'll already know, with the codes, we can see it and we'll be like, oh, yeah, I already knew that about myself. And then that way we don't have to second guess it. And then there's all this other stuff as well that it just gives a languaging to what we're experiencing already, so that we can have better awareness of it. Because if we have a language to something with our psychology, or a motivation that we have, or something we're doing that's out of alignment, or a dynamic that we have with people, a sexual characteristic, a business thing. I mean, literally can go into all these different things. If we have a languaging around it, then we can actually identify it and have awareness of it when it shows up in our life. And that's like one of the greatest teachings, is ourself, is our own dynamics and our own mechanics. So that is really the gift of these languages, is it helps us to enter into the experiment of being one with our existence. And then it gives us that ability to actually potentiate our consciousness by having the awareness of these codes, right? And so that we can really understand things on a deeper level. We have better relationships. We get out of the drama of blame, shame, and guilt, because we realize that life is really just teaching us. And then because we have the tools to make decisions from a place of sovereignty rather than from a lifetime of a conditioned mind, then we're able to really bring about, decisions that are correct for ourselves, and we can move away from something, or go towards things that are actually correct. And then that's the beauty of discovering who we are in that process.
Yeah, love all of that. When I wrote down, and you said it, and I just said it again, is the radical self acceptance. I think that's like one of the bonus courses that's coming up next in the course. And so it's like, oh, there it is again. It's all about healing self image. I mean, we named it that, but it's about healing the self image of what we've been told or what we thought, the unworthiness, those stories that we were not born that way. We were born smiling and happy and loving, and, until we were conditioned out of that language of knowing. It's like that's what I feel like I could sum up what you just said. It's like putting a language to an inner compass or an inner knowing that was already there. Because when we would talk about, like when we would meet and have sessions, and we would talk about the transits, and we would talk about, what was going on in astrology, and, and the codes all at the same time, and it making sense. It's like it gave words to something that I knew but couldn't say. And it was almost this language of mysticism, wouldn't you say? Because I didn't know that I was connected in that way. Like it didn't, for whatever reason. And then as I started, really looking into the chart and understanding myself, and like the emotional connection, and then I could suddenly trust it. It wasn't this invisible mysticism or this blind faith.
Right.
It's like it put a picture, or it put a language or an understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like bridges. It's like a bridge to what we internally feel, but then we didn't have that language. We didn't know exactly what it was. We just felt something. And then what happens in the world is our mind will create a story around it because it doesn't understand it. And then that's where drama and these stories and these patterns and the victim and the trauma and all the conditioning and suffering and being out of alignment, that's where all that comes from, is the mind's interpretation of something that it really doesn't understand. So the mind is beautiful. It is our greatest gift. It gives us logic. It is a tool. It is our computer. And like you said, we come into this world smiling, and we're, this like clean slate. We're immediately being conditioned, and no fault of anyone. We're all just doing the best we can. But it's a slow homogenization, a whittling down of who we actually are as a differentiated being. And we're supposed to be like everyone else. Oh, don't do that. Don't do this. People aren't going to like you. Why are you doing that? So the things that are natural to us as humans and within our codes that makes us different, a lot of times are looked down upon, and not always like brought out. So then the mind creates a strategy to cope with the suffering and the pain of not being accepted. And then it creates all these strategies of being who we're not. So then we have to, either we live our life being who we're not, and that's like the majority of people. And it's really, it is what it is. Or, we discover that it's okay to like accept ourselves, even if we've been taught in the world, oh, these things, maybe aren't accepted, or, it's different. Why are you doing that? And one of the best things that learning all of these languages and these tools and all the time I've spent studying all this stuff, what it has done for me, like the best thing is that I feel good about myself. I feel comfortable in myself, and that's great. It's like everyone deserves that. We can relax into ourselves and not do these patterns that we used to do of trying to be what everyone else wants us to be. And even people that are highly spiritual or highly successful or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. A lot of us, and I still do it too, but we have these programs of like trying to please, trying to like, do what we think will make it work or make us successful or whatever the programming is. That really is the process of true awakening, is realizing that that stuff is not actually who we are.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the beauty of these languages and these codes and these systems. And it really addresses the mind.
Tactics.
Yeah.
When I did transcendental meditation, when I was in there, like in the training of, and it was, understanding that the mind was always trying to grasp awareness, like hook it and make sense of it, like make meaning of it. And I kept thinking of this, like this just big claw where it just, and then it would just like stay and spin and loop until it had a rhyme or reason or understanding that it could explain, right? The story, it would create the story. And we still do that. We try to make meaning of everything. Always, everything. And I know for me personally, it's been an addiction to breakthrough because I was always looking for those moments of liberation, and then understanding that about myself so that I can let it go. And so it's almost like this urgency to understand, which there's no way we can quickly understand these systems, but there's this urgency to quickly understand it so that the mind gets its intellectual hit, and then it's about letting it go and just living. And so it's like such a mind fuck, that you're scratching and digging and and trying to put too much information. The mind can't even understand it. It's just packing on top of packing on top of packing. There's no, and then eventually getting the breakthrough. Oh, I get it. I understand. And then it never really mattered. It drives me crazy, and yet I see the pattern and I see my clients doing it and I'm always telling them, like, don't try to go and figure it all out. It's just going to just go and live. And then yet I remember the hunger for that, and me doing it myself. So it's like, can we dance in that? Can we dance between that? And I feel like that's what you and I can bring to the table, and help others explore is, yeah, let's be present and let's explore and let's experiment and let's question the shit out of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And, I was there too. And I still always have that hunger for, just making sense out of a lot of stuff. And yeah, especially when I do readings for people or when this information is being introduced, especially if a person sees a chart, a human design chart specifically too, look at all the numbers and they go, oh, I want to know all these things. And yes, it's fascinating, but it's kind of like learning the alphabet, but then trying to read a novel. So like you haven't learned like that the words have meanings or how to put sentence structure or like what the story is and those type of things. So it's kind of like I hope to bring things in a way that is structured so that people can learn things in the order that they need to learn them, so that they have the sentence structure and how to make sense of it in the correct way. Otherwise, what can happen is people get lost in the information and they miss the whole point.
And it becomes the next label. It
Yeah.
becomes the next, because they take one thing and then they buy into that one thing. And then without understanding, I like to say it's like we're teaching the basics from the beginning. Because, you think of this even with the Bible, how many people take it and go to that one scripture that they want. It was like, you're not your body, it's my body. I'm supposed, they take that one thing and then make a whole story about it, their whole life about it. And then it just becomes another label, another condition, and that's really what I think we have talked about so many times. I didn't even introduce you to my people until 2 years later, because I was like, they're going to go down rabbit holes. They're going to make this the next thing. I want to be really particular because I met you when I was I was already kind of playing in it enough to understand what I was looking for. And I was looking for someone to come in and read for my group, for my clients, to be able to do, because I was like, that's not something I do, but I didn't want to work with someone who was going to make that their new truth, or their new thing. And I was very picky about that. I think I've said that to you so many times, and it was really about, I needed to get to a point where I felt safe, that I could trust that it was going to be an experiment, an experience, something that we were going to be constantly questioning, and exploring together. You just said something else that I wanted to bring up here, and it was about differentiated and this, the strategy and coping, and it's that coping with not being accepted. I think it's so mind blowing that we need to feel safe and belong. And so we do everything to feel accepted by the tribe. And what the actual result is not belonging at all, because not being ourselves at all. So the very thing that we start off trying to achieve, which is feeling safe and belonging and being, is the very thing that we lose when we become what someone else thinks we should belong to or should be labeled as. Even as I'm thinking, so I'm going on my 12th grandbaby, and I'm thinking of the conversations, each time one is born. And there's an instant how they're going to be or who they're going to be like or what. And it just starts like there. And then it's like we're always looking for that, what's familiar, what's similar to the other one, or, who can we, like, we need to compare. We need to compare them to someone to understand. It's just our language, right? It's just how we relate and how we don't mean to. I don't think that it's the labeling and the patterning and all this.
Yeah, it's just a mechanism of the mind. That's what the mind does. And like, we can't stop it, right? Especially depending on what codes you have up there in the ajna or the head center. That's how your mind is going to process things and look at things. And it's like a machine, that's filtering your reality, that's, has all these canned responses, these canned gears and mechanisms in a particular way that it operates. And a lot of times we're not aware. It's just kind of going on its own. So it's like, yeah, even that whole energy around, why did that person say that? Or what did they mean by that? And that, all that kind of pressure, because that's what it is. The pressure, the mental pressure is essential because it helps us, it's something that we can use to communicate and to research and to discover and to access consciousness. But the issue is when we use that same kind of energy to make decisions in our life. And that's like, what these systems show us is that we don't have to use it inwards like that. The mind is for others. The mind is to share our experience with the other person and to, research and to entertain us and all that. But it's not meant to like drive our life, because it creates all those like dramas and the this and the that's and measurements and judgments and doubts and all the things that are essential to mentally understanding life, but not to make decisions.
Yeah, well, we're such mental beings, like, that's our world, that's our conditioning, it's like to be that way.
Like evolutionarily, that's where we are. We are only 7 years away from changing though to something else. And that's especially why it's also right now so like, the world is so crazy and like everyone has all these different belief systems and there's a million ways to get to the truth. And that is true. There's so many different ways to get to the truth because collectively we're in an ocean of time where we are in this time frame. We are in the space of closing the door on the mental process of the collective. And we've been in this stage for a long time and we're like at the end of it. and we're moving to something else. But this time period, there's a lot of pressure to get the final answers of what we're like going to get.
Yeah. And, because this is called More Than Mindset, right? So I definitely want to hit in on this topic because I am in a mindset world and, have been, and it's a beautiful thing and have had a lot of success, a lot of financial rewards and, so much business stuff. But the reason it's called More Than Mindset is because nothing else was allowed. It was all mindset, mindset, mindset. And I'm more like in the creative and the spirituals and it's like so much more than mindset. And could not find a place of belonging even there, right? So it was like, so when I would try to bring in, like I was trying to get coaching on understanding what was physically breaking down in my body and saying how I knew it was coming from mental and emotional processing. And there was like completely rejected, like, why do you believe that? And it's just what you believe. And if you don't believe it, then it isn't so. And I was like, because I've been down for 16 weeks because my toe is broken, like all of these things that just made sense to me. And so it was this concept. I was like, why am I even arguing this? Like, I don't want to stay stuck in time. And so I think it's so interesting that you just said, like, we're at the end of it and it's stronger than it's ever been. Look how many people are just learning about mindset, Danielle.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing, when we look at the programming, in the collective, in the field, in our world, the programming could be from the TV, from different systems, from everything, right? From the planets, from whatever. There's been a lot of programming coming in too for a long time with this, the mindset stuff and the secrets and, all these spiritual programs of manifestation and all these quote unquote spiritual teachers teaching that. And I'm not saying putting them down, but it's, not going to work for everyone. That's for sure. There's definitely an important aspect that we need to make sure is not distorted when we talk about mindset, because if you're trying to focus and just use the mind to manifest, that is distortion. You're creating distortion in your reality, and the reality will match that because you're trying to impose your will on your life. Right.
I love that you go where I'm going without us knowing we're going. Do you see my eyes light up when I'm just like, here we go. The last 4 things you brought up, I just wrote down and then you say it. It's so fascinating.
I love it. Well, yeah. So it's like really taking a different approach because that was a program as well. I like to call these things orders, right? These orders. So you could be in a religious order. You could be in a political order. It's like a thought cycle that keeps you stuck in this frame, right? And it doesn't allow you to move forward. So there are these orders of thought processes of how we should live, how we need to manifest. And a lot of people create their own orders in their life, their own deep state with how they function because they're stuck in these strategies of distortion, of creating their, the consequences in their life of suffering. So yeah, I know you wanted to talk about like free will.
I definitely that's where I was going. I wrote down law of attraction and free will. Because the law of attraction is like, oh, you think it. That's like that all. It was just this constant. And then I was like, actually, the flaw is leaving the the vibration, leaving the feeling, the experience out of it, and just jumping, not unraveling the story, not navigating the habits and behaviors, not knowing enough about yourself. And I feel like that's the guts of human design and Gene Keys is that center part. So it's like, yeah, you can have a desire, but how about a desire from who you actually are? Not because your neighbor or your mentor or your peer or, but from you, because you will be so much more fulfilled and satisfied and successful and whole and healthy. And, luckily most of my life was lived that way. I just went through just a couple of years where I kind of put myself in that. And I think it was just for experience as a 6'2", the going off the roof phase. Matter of fact, I was like hanging on by the shingles, like trying to take that one more dip in the sand. It's like, I'm going all in, I'm going to do this. And I was like, I couldn't even be me or expand in the container. There was no room in the container for me to be me, because it was just so bound. It took a lot to get me off of it, to get me out of it, to get me into this next phase, because I was in that wanting to belong, wanting to feel like finding my place in a community, feeling safe, being known or seen as who I am in this tribe, or you know what I'm saying? Like this exact thing that I just explained, which is why I articulated it in that way, is because, having the experience myself. And that's as a 6, I learned through experience. And so by trying to take someone else's experience and make that my own, it was never going to work.
Yeah.
That's the path, And so, yeah, let's talk about law of attraction and free will. Is free will free? How much control do we have?
Well, if we think about it, which is what we can use our mind for right now, basically, with all the stuff that we had just spoken about throughout the whole call about how the mind, first of all, you're not your mind. You're not your mind. It's a computer that you have. It's part of your body, and the brain is separate than the mind. They're different things. But basically, if we understand that the mind is a product of both our mechanisms, so our genetic codes, indicating how that computer operates. And then also it is a product of the wiring of the neurons, the neural pathways, which is the patterns, the conditioning, right? We had basic psychology stuff, right? So if we know that, then how can we use that machine or that computer how is it going to be able to manifest our reality when it's like really distorted from the world already? Right. Now, the mind is great when we use it for others and we put it out and we use it to share with other people. But there's no way it can even know what we actually want, because it's basing its entire understanding off of conditioning. Right. It's like a dog that hears the bell, like Pavlov's dog. Well, now all of a sudden the dog's going to say, oh, well, yeah, I just want the food. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the bell, whatever. It's like this whole thing is just all conditioning. So that already is just one step of it, that we can't use it to try to create, what we think we want. Because in essence, like, you might think that you want to be a novelist or someone that writes books, but then you get into it and you realize that you hate writing books. You just like the idea of.
And maybe you were 4 years old and your favorite person was an author. And so you thought, like, you loved seeing that they were doing a book signing and how everyone loved them and adored them and then somehow created this perception or this understanding. Or maybe someone told you, like, you're going to be that one day, according to their perception. And then it just, I say, like, the life experiences, I think of like as these files, right? Like, we make these folders. Oh, I need to remember that. I need to remember that. Oh, they hurt me. I'm never going to let them do that again. I'm there. And so we create like all of these files, and then that's stuck on top of our processor. And here we can't even get to the keyboard. There's just so much information we're holding on to, all to protect ourselves, to think we know, and to think to feel safe or to belong, or, whatever that
like virus.
Unconscious strategy is.
I did some calls on that before, which we could definitely talk about that whole thing and how it relates to Corona, the crown.
So while we're here, let's go into just basic understanding. So I'll interpret it my way and then let you do it your way. But I think of like this sponge, this empty sponge. And here's your parents, your teachers, you're just like downloading information in that sponge. It's just, that is hypnotherapy, right? We hypnotize the infant to be the, 9-year-old or, however it comes, it's like all conditioned. And so that's the way that I explain it is, the mind learns through repetition. And so it continues to hear it and hear it and hear it and see it and see it, and then it becomes it. And so I want to just hear your take and how you would explain conditioning, because some people are like, what are y'all talking about, conditioning?
Right. Well, in conditioning, this is a good point. This is something really important to bring up. And with the future calls we're going to be doing as well, we're going to be redefining all of the words that are just thrown around. And so, yeah, conditioning is not bad. First of all, conditioning is something that's happening all the time when you're around other people. And it's also happening with like the planets, and we'll get into the science of that later. But basically what conditioning is because you are like a sponge, like this porous creature. You're mostly receptive. You're a conduit that reads information, and you're in a vehicle, in a vessel, in a machine that is extracting consciousness, a very specific, differentiated consciousness. So conditioning is when we try to interpret that information as our own, first of all, and we store it through the mind in the gray areas of the brain. We'll get into like the pineal gland and all of that soon, but basically how that information and the interpretation of it, when we don't know who we are and when we don't know how to be ourselves, the interpretation of how we receive the information is distorted. So conditioning is equivalent to, it can be equivalent to distortion. Now, conditioning also is not bad. It's just if you don't have awareness of it, you cannot stop conditioning. You cannot like prevent it. But what you can do is recognize it. And then eventually conditioning becomes your teacher because it shows you not only who you are, but what the other person expects from you. And then you use your own internal authority to decide if that's correct or not. So really conditioning is when, we're using or we're receiving other people's energy and information from their codes, from their existence.
Codes, experiences, labels, whatever that has been handed to them also, right? And then we continue to look for it. Like, no, someone else, please tell me what to do. Let me find a guru. Let me find a coach. Let me find a mentor. Let me find someone else to tell me what to do. That in itself is conditioning. Always looking for someone else to tell me what to do.
Yep. And it could even be someone just sitting next to you, not even talking to you. Just you being next to them is you're receiving their information, and you're conditioning them too. Let's not forget that, right? You're conditioning, they're conditioning. And the science has proved this, that our bodies give off information and energy, right? Between each other. And we don't even have to talk or touch. That our bodies, our aura, if we want to talk about it like that, the infiniteness of what we are is receiving information from others, and science proves this. So we have the maps to look at that. And so conditioning, what it does is it takes us away from who we are if we're not aware. Okay. And this is what we call the not self. This is what we call, coming out of alignment. And this is when the mind tries to use our experiences, other people's energy, past things, conditioning, whatever, to make decisions. And this is why we have so many problems. And this is how we can also fix it. Because imagine that you have a map, a very precise map, that tells you exactly where the conditioning is for you and what exactly it's going to look like, right? So for example, Kim has a completely open root, right? A root center. This is a space of coding in her vehicle that is purely receptive. It's a gift, right? Because where we are conditioned, these open spaces within us where we receive, this is actually the only time that we interact with the external world. So they're important and it's perfect, right? So for example, with an open root, Kim's conditioning could be, when she's around certain other people, she might feel rushed, like she needs to hurry up and get through this or get done with it or, but then there's a gift also. And there's a lot more to it, but I'm being vague right now. The gift to it is that she could use the other person's energy to get something done quickly, right? She has the gift of being very fast. And there's always kind of like a maybe more positive conditioning. But again, Kim should not use that to make decisions. And then there's also like the unhealthy conditioning. And that is going to help us when we start to understand ourselves, we start to awaken, we start coming back to ourselves. When we realize unhealthy conditioning from people, that's when we realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't spend so much time with that person right now. It's not a healthy situation. It's really reorienting our life back to our correctness.
And this is even in our sleeping. This is huge in relationships, marriage. It's like the way we've always done things is not necessarily the way to wellness, and so you'll see this in even at work, your partners at work, your peers, you're being in mastermind groups, and taking on the energy. We even talk about what is the Schumann resonance when we talk about that. This is real. This is measured throughout the world, that's aura or, these words that some people consider woo, but there is so much proof
There's
to it
science.
and understanding that you can go into a group of people and feel completely different than you felt out in the hall.
Yeah, and I like to, reaffirm that to people too with these languages. It's not necessarily a spiritual science. It's like a mental science. Some people are shocked when I say that. I'm like, yeah, this is a mental science. It's not therapeutic, it's not spiritual, even though of course you can use it to access higher spirituality, of course. But yeah, and with what you were saying with the sleeping together and with what we just talked about with the auras or your bodies, right? All this energy that comes off of you outside of your skin. We don't just end at our skin. We sleep next to each other. Again, you're having an entire night of just conditioning. Your body can't rest on its own, just with its own mechanics. Yeah, that's kind of common knowledge in human design. We're not really supposed to sleep next to each other. This is more about a radical path of truth for your sovereignty. So this is not for everyone. And a lot of people, when I say that to them, I'll say, hey, I recommend you sleeping alone because you have this health issue, you're having this problem with your partner, you're not empowered, all these things in your life are showing up. Just try sleeping alone. See what that does for you.
They have thoughts about that, right?
Oh, there are people that they're like, that's crazy. And I get it. It's our cultural program that like we need to sleep next to each other. But watch what happens. The first week may be hard, because you're used to spending 20 years next to your partner. But then it's going to actually turn out being hard to sleep in the same bed with someone because when you're not sleeping with someone for so long and you take that time to do it, when you go back to trying to sleep with someone, you'll see how disruptive it is to your field. And it's crazy.
It's fascinating because as I've been like these last few years that I feel like I've cleaned out a lot of these open centers that weren't, they were just like, they felt filthy. Like there was just so much conditioning in them. But I noticed that even in hotel rooms, I felt I would like get these different sensations and feeling different. And I just became so much more aware of what was mine. But I had to spend time with myself. I did that 3-week road trip by myself and I didn't have anyone else in my field and in nature a lot. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was sleeping from one night to the next. And I was really trusting myself to know and asking, myself questions. And I would just run into the right person at the right time who would lead me to the right place. And, I think it was a big part of this experiment and trusting. We are so used to, asking someone else, like there's an expert who's supposed to know better, but you want your experts to take you inside to yourself, to your own inner compass. And it's tough those first few years because you are so conditioned, you don't know the difference. It's how you've always felt. We grew into it. So we really don't know about the other. But I wanted to ask, what do your clients say when you talk about sleeping alone? Because this is something my kids kind of like, well, Grammy's room or whatever. And I was like, guys, just so you know, like people have been having affairs for freaking 10, 20, 30 years. They never slept in the same house. So all of that is just your perception of what you think that means, that is unhealthy or healthy or wrong or right, because it actually doesn't articulate the facts.
Yep. I think there's probably at least two reasons, right? The social stigma, because immediately people
That's it.
if they find out, oh, you're not sleeping with your partner, then people have to feel like they have to explain that, like, no, there's not a problem in our marriage, or even if there was, whatever. It's none of their business. And then the second thing is like there may also be like codependency or control things or insecurity things from one or both of the people too. They would be like, well, if my partner doesn't sleep in the bed with me, that means that, oh my God, we're not going to be together or whatever the case is.
And maybe that is going to be it because you realize that without that it wasn't anyway. It was just habit and behavior, right? Sometimes that is true. It's the beginning. The show last week was called, the beginning of the end, what has been. Whether that mean it's a complete ending or just a change of, doesn't matter. It's just, are we willing to take the risk to even investigate and explore and try this? If you're not healthy, you're not feeling good, you're not feeling rested, you're not feeling vibrant, you do feel codependent and, attached to, like, you don't have the ability to make decisions for yourself. I'm thinking of a couple of clients who are reflectors, had no idea about that until this work, and a couple that were projectors. Just so wide open and susceptible and not even know it. And it's so disempowering when you don't understand it. So even if you choose not to take that approach, at least you're empowered to understand what may not be yours. And that just opens the door to start exploring, and to me, that's more free will, is the ability to get in alignment with what is,
Yeah.
not getting into the mind and making something.
Exactly. That's a really good point. And it's like just allowing things to be how they want to be without trying to come up with strategies of either like trying to people please or do things like controlling things or, so if you were to sleep in a separate bed and your partner decided that they didn't want to be with you anymore, so be it. You know what I mean? Just like let it be, because what is will be. What needs to be can be, but we don't have to force, we don't have to. I mean, imagine having that type of trust and acceptance and surrender in your life to where no matter what happens, that you are okay with it. And that's also what this gives you, and it's definitely not about just letting people walk on you or not having boundaries. It's the exact opposite. And, just really coming into this new space of, okay, I'm not going to try to put all this tension and pressure and energy into clinging on to something that maybe isn't supposed to be mine. Or, what would happen if you stop clinging and just, it
And
doesn't stay?
just let it's
Yeah.
actually, the vulnerability is so powerful to really. I did a Facebook Live a couple of years ago for Valentine's Day, and it was like, are you willing to, do an evaluation on your relationship the way you would be evaluated in corporate? It's like, hey, what's working, what's not working, and you think about this, especially if you've been together for years and one starts snoring or the sleep habits change, or, they got to get up and pee 3 times a night, or this one, wants to go bed at this time and this one wants to wake up with the chickens. And, there's so much of that we don't even give ourselves consideration of, that's not working or working. And I remember when I did it, I was like, are you willing to question? And are you willing to make the change that may be uncomfortable or unfamiliar? That was really big.
Yeah.
And I thought, while I was talking, I have the open ajna in head. And, as I was talking, I was like, actually, why do the kids get their own room anyway? Like, we build houses to make sure that all of the kids have their own room, and then we have to share, and we're the ones working and paying for it. It's like, how is that fair? And it's really opened up some opportunities to explore, like, wait, why do we do that? And how is that fair? And then even thinking about children who are wide open and susceptible and having to share with 3 other kids and having to, like, there's so much of this stuff that if we were aware of and we could explain, even if they're in that situation, they're still empowered to, okay, I'm going to go in the den tonight, or I'm going to go here for a few hours, or I need to do homework a little bit differently than the others, right? All of that stuff. Like, I just think the information is so empowering. And that's how we tap into free will. It's the will to choose once you know. But we have to be willing to expose and take risk of what people are going to say about us when we're talking about something different. And when we're talking about systems and, especially like, actually, what am I talking about? When we think about conditioning, we've been conditioned by religion.
Yeah.
That how much more conditioned can you be than Catholicism,
And society. And if, with what we were talking about with the beds and the family dynamics and things like that, which human design and genetics and what we can see within these systems actually shows us the genetic origins of the societal programs as well, and where we're heading, which has to do with that evolutionary change we're moving into now as well. We're moving into new space, which is why over the last 100 years or more, we've seen how, if we look back, we are coming from a disempowering type of culture. If you think about it, women didn't have rights, Black people didn't have rights, like kids were working at like 6 years old, like crazy stuff. Like, that really was not healthy. We were in this whole other paradigm, and we're moving into this paradigm of like, okay, and that's why we see all this stuff in the world right now that's really crazy, Yeah.
So we have to go from one end to the other end in order to swing back to about an in between,
Well, the codes there's a mutation happening in the collective. So yeah, we're that's a good point. The way I've described it before is kind of like a torus donut, that like it's a vortex that goes out and then it comes in. And even in science, we know that mutation, which is a spontaneous change, sudden change, happens out of entropy, right? So there's chaos before we go into the mutation, which is where we are now. So realizing that we're all in this space of breaking these paradigms, breaking these programs, these orders, and having these codes to help us know what is actually healthy, what is correct, and reevaluating a lot of perspectives. A lot of these systems are here to help us shift our perspectives in like what we accepted as the norm, like sleeping together in the same bed, when we've just discussed how scientifically that is like unhealthy for you to like do on a regular basis. And I get it. I understand. It's like you want to, love on your partner and, be there together and all that stuff. But
The resistance is so real. The
yeah,
resistance to hearing that for the first time. And then eventually you're just like, oh yeah, it's just like I tried it and it worked. I secretly tried it and it worked. And, that's kind of how we create change. But the perception of what that means, I think, is what is so scary. I do have a few clients who have tried it and played around with it, and huge difference on their health. Especially someone who's got like autoimmune, or like it just doesn't make sense why these physical conditions are showing up in their body, for them especially, because they're so against, they don't even have a voice. And a lot of them, it's because they are so open and their partner defined. And so they didn't even notice that they didn't even have that, that opportunity to even, it's like it just solidified that that's just who they are now, to experience this. And guys, this is not like a quick fix. It's not like, oh, go pull up your design or get one reading and you're going to know all of this stuff. It really doesn't work that way. This is an experiment. It's an experience. It's something that we transition through, but you can get immediate liberation just from understanding. Like just one glimpse of something could really open your mind to expansion and start to maybe drop some of the resistance and be willing to question some things. What we're going to do is actually do a 2-part, because this is going longer. And I kind of knew it would. We talked about it beforehand, but so we're going to stop it and then we're going to come back for the next week and talk about what we're actually doing with this and how we're bringing this program to you guys and how you can have accessibility to it and where to start at. So I want to end today with talking about what can knowing this help you with. And that is relationships. This is relationships with your partners, with yourself, your spirituality, your children, your parents, your just friendships in general. It just gives you that aerial view. And I'm telling you, the minute you see it, all of a sudden, it's like you get this past life review of, oh my God, that's what happened with so-and-so and so-and-so. It's like you'll realize these deep, meaningful relationships that were everything. And then something was triggered and you didn't make it past that trigger. Like it suddenly will bring light. You'll understand how relationships are tricky. They're just like mirrors and projections, and it's this thing for us to see without. And then, to see inside and outside of ourselves. And then our health, how if you are experiencing, a lack of vital, optimal health, if you are not feeling well, if you are struggling with chronic fatigue, chronic issues, I'll just say undiagnosed conditions is typically, what we see, that it's like, it just doesn't make sense. I'm healthy. I eat everything right. I exercise. I don't understand why I have this. This can unveil some of that for you. And the other thing is career and money, really understanding on how to be in alignment with who you actually are and what your gift is to the world, and being in contribution of that. That's how we create this ease and flow in abundance. Like Danielle is living her design. I am like, she's been doing it longer than I have. I for sure see a difference since I started. And, her and I hooking up together was really nice. We're both 6'2". She's, it's like we get to, I don't know, we just created this new, deep, meaningful relationship where it's not, I'll say it's not personal, but it's so personal, so that you can stop doing the things that are creating, self-healing is about empowering yourself to make decisions that are aligned with who you are. Guys, we already know that there's an entity greater, bigger, broader than ourselves that's creating this life here. And it's our role, our job to get on board and get in alignment with that That is the free will. And I love that too, that we get to agree and disagree and have different viewpoints, of how she does things.
Yeah, you're like experiential and I'm more like, okay, here's the like logical steps of just like the mechanics and like the science, and then you help them like experience and integrate it
In
into
real life.
their lives. And it's necessary to have both of these. I just wanted to add one more thing, that this knowledge will give you access, if it's meant for you, to embody your unique consciousness, right? And that's like the greatest gift. So what you think that your life should be, what you actually need, like on a soul level, on this internal consciousness level, will be able to come about through what we've all just talked about, using these languages to align yourself, get the life that you are here to get, and have the awareness and get to experience things in a much different way, which is the most important part of,
Yeah.
of
And
this,
And it's like I refer back to the punchline approach, because that's kind of the book in the process where all of this, is that experience is coming from, is really getting present, unpacking what's not, so that you can create the life as you are, as the entity of what you truly are. And
Mhm.
then the exact how-to steps, just commit to that. And then you have a life of liberation, of ease, of flow, of living in that sacred soul essence. There's nothing more beautiful than waking up and walking through the day in ease of just being. But you can't understand it or articulate it until you experience it. And so with that, that's what I mean by it's not a quick fix, but it's the minute you have an understanding, there's suddenly this sigh of relief and people drop into their body like nothing else I've ever
I
experienced.
was literally just thinking that it's like the term embodiment, like
It
truly
is.
you become embodied. Also, the other thing is that your impact with your voice and your expression becomes so full of truth that it is so powerful that like it changes the way that you communicate, because you're in a different position now. You're in your truth. So now you actually have your true gift to give to the world.
There's an articulation of words. And I'll have clients tell me, they're like, I don't know. I used to hear you talk. I had no idea what you were talking about until I knew what you were talking about. Then I needed to know more about it. Like it was, it's like I hear that so often. They're like, I have a group right now I'm a part of, and she's like, sometimes I have no idea what you're saying, but it's interesting and it feels good, but I have no idea what you're saying. And then there'll be an experience, and then suddenly their language changes and they start using these words. But for sure, it is about awareness. So you got to get present first. And then you have to really be willing to, it's that daring vulnerability to assess, to explore, to ask the questions, to be willing to hear something that may scare you. It's like you really have to be able to do that before you can ever process, integrate, and embody.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just posted that meme today about Raw and how he was talking about only 4% of people can actually do
What?
this. Yep.
What?
So, and that's the whole thing, because the fear, and it's not for everyone, but even if they don't get to their like full awakening and their full potential and all that, this information can still help. But
Where
it
you can get to the liberation and the hope for sure.
yeah.
Instantly, like that, just that simple understanding, like just doing, when I first came to you, you do like this 3 hour, because you take a lot of time. You're assessing different systems. You're not just doing human design or gene keys. You're actually
Mhm.
pulling together this whole blueprint, like this soul
Right.
blueprint. And then, as you assess all of that, and then they have a couple of readings with you. So you do it as a package. And I love that, because it's not this, oh, I want to buy this know-it-all in one time. You can't, there's no way to,
Yeah, you're an
you can't
infinite
absorb it. You can't.
complex being.
Yeah. So you need the time. So I was definitely attracted to the way you did that. It made it so much, more meaningful. And you remember one time I said, I think you're just telling me the same thing every time. I'm just like not getting it. But then, I have the two. I'm in denial. I have self-denial. It's like so much of, I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. Let me go investigate. Then I'd come back and like, damn it, here it is again.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about. It's like we can hear the information. It's like leading a horse to water.
Yeah.
But if you don't actually practice with this stuff, like you're looking for another quick fix. You're looking for another spiritual guru, and that's not this. This is like get in there, try it, I mean, I'm lucky for like my life, like forced me, like, 'cause I was living in another country and I literally like had no other choice but like trust my design. And I was so scared for years. And then I finally was like breaking through when after month, I'm like, oh man, I keep getting into these fears but my life situation is totally jacked to where I have to follow my design. And then I realized that.
Sorry about the quick cutoff there, guys. I didn't know that was going to happen. So we have extended this to a part 2 that will come out next week. So sorry about not ending it in a, I don't know, shall I say a satisfying way? I didn't realize that there was a time limit to the recording. So just catch us next week. In the meantime, you can go into the show notes and you can find the link to the More Than Mindset group where you can find Danielle and I. Her information is also there if you want to just go straight to her website or look up what she's doing. We will complete this conversation next week, and we're super excited to tell you about Discover Your Design and all of the cool things that we have coming up. All right, until next week. Catch you in the group.
Thanks for listening to this episode of More Than Mindset.